I call the meeting of the House Education Policy Committee to order. There is a quorum, and the first order of business will be to review and approve the minutes. Representative Keeler, have you had a moment to review the minutes?
I have and move to approve them, Chair.
Thank you, Representative Keeler. Any member discussions, questions, or issues with the minutes? If not, we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes for Wednesday, January 11th, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, well, we have approval of the minutes for January 11th. The next order of business is that we will have a bill presented to us, Representative Keeler's House File 211. And Representative Keeler, when you're prepared, would you like to move to the testimony stand and present your bill?
Yes.
Well, members, as you know, Representative Keeler is a member of this committee. And so, Representative Keeler, would you like to move your bill? Our intention is to refer this to the State and Local Governments Finance and Policy Committee in this meeting today. And would you like to move your bill, Representative Keeler?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to move House File 211 before the committee with recommendation to move to State Gov Policy and Finance.
All right. Thank you, Representative Keeler. The bill is before us. And Representative Keeler, once more for the record, would you like to identify yourself and then begin your presentation?
Sure. Thanks, Madam Chair. Representative Heather Keeler, District 4A, she, her, hers. Talking to you today about House File 211. Sorry, I have some, okay. So what this bill does is it's similar to what we've done in the past around this bill is we're working on an effort to create Indigenous Peoples Day here in the state of Minnesota. A couple things that I just want to pause and I guess ask the committee. I know that we can't really do like show of hands, right? But the education setting just wants me to gauge the room. How many of you know and deeply understand the history regarding Eloise Cobell? How many of you know the treaty land in which your school and your district resides in? How many of you know the history of Deb Haaland and the Department of Interior? These are all things that many people in Minnesota actually don't know the answer to. I sit here before you as a Cobell scholar. Eloise Cobell was one of my heroes. I call her a shero, but she actually fought the U.S. government and won the largest U.S. government settlement in U.S. history based on misuse of land. These are just examples of some of the things that we can talk about in our education settings. And so what this bill does is if Indigenous Peoples Day becomes a state recognized holiday, if schools decide to have school on that day, they would be required to have a minimum of at least an hour of conversation around the Indigenous culture. Now, I know typically everybody always goes back to the trauma and the harm of genocide, which I always love to talk about because I think it's true and honest that we have to talk about the harm that's happened on this land. But there are also a lot of really beautiful things that we can talk about. We can share our language. We can share our dance. As a jingle dress dancer, we've gone into many schools and have done examples of the history behind our dances, the history behind our language, the different language that we speak here on this land. And so today I have brought testifiers. They can do much more explaining why this is important for us to talk about it in our education settings. This is not far off from the other state requirements and statutes that we have if we're in school for other state recognized holidays, such as Veterans Day and such, that there's a requirement that schools would do a minimum of an hour of conversation around those topics as well. So it's just lining statute with state holidays. That's all I have for this, Chair. If we can move to our testifiers.
All right. Thank you, Representative Keeler. I have first on the list Cindy Milda. And it could be my eyesight that makes me mispronounce some of the words, but I hope I saw that correctly. Would you please introduce yourself to the committee and proceed with your testimony?
Chair and members of the committee, ha mataki api, shante washte, iu ha nape chiu zapi ye. Ma Dakota ye, shakpe, mede wakantuan, oyate, e matahan. Amos and Rose Crooks, tioshbe, e mataha. Dakota ia, pejuti yaha maniwi, de miai. Demie. Washichu Ia Sindimilda Imakiapie. In Dakota, what I said was, hello, my relatives. I greet you with a good heart and a warm handshake. I am Dakota, and my homelands are the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community. And I come from the Amos and Rose Crooks family. My Dakota name is Walks with Medicine Woman. My English name is Cindy Milda, and I am the Public Education Coordinator at the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux Community, or SMSC.
Thank you for that identification. I think we're well placed now.
Thank you. So I am here today to testify in favor of House File 211. My role with SMSC is to share our community stories with groups from school and church groups to senior citizen and youth clubs at Hochikaditi SMSC's Cultural Center. During these tours, I often tell my personal story, as that really connects with people. When I turned 18 years old, not that long ago, I was denied the right to vote in my home city, county, and state. SMSC members were subject to land status in a city that considered us illegal aliens at that time. It took Minnesota Supreme Court action in 1985 to restore our right to vote. Many people do not know this story. Many people do not know the historic and ongoing resiliency of Indigenous people. And as you can see, I use the word resiliency because I do not want to use the word historical trauma, as we are very resilient people. So I want to put that out there, that we are very resilient and that we've come a long way from where we were. So taking that trauma out and changing that word and changing that, that context, that yes, we had that trauma, but we're still here. We're still resilient. And so that I share with you as well. There are educators out there who desire to know more about Indigenous history, not only our past, but our future and our story of resiliency. House File 211 will not suddenly create these resources for educators, but it opens a pathway for this conversation in a state-sanctioned way, and I hope you will support it. Pidamayaye, thank you for your time, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And, you know, if there's clarifying questions or a question at this point, I think we can entertain those as we have different testifiers coming forward. But seeing no questions, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Mr. Sam Strong, Secretary of the Red Lake Nation. Please identify yourself and then proceed with your testimony.
Bonjour, bimose gnu indigenous cause, makwan du dem, misquagamui, zaganing and donjaba. Bonjour, wabano, jalano, no, giwedano. Bonjour, nagani zimanadu, nanabuju, mamnana ki, migwich gishi gizis to be gizis to be gizis, anigoknish washington do to mishiki, gilner shugichimanadu, we do cover shugichimanadu. Migwich waso, benesuk, mitig, zaganing, mino bimandijuan, anshnabe bimandijuan. My name is Sam Strong. I'm Secretary of Red Lake. And before I spoke today, I asked for assistance from our ancestors and assistance from, you know, when we pray, we recognize everything around us, you know, everything from, you know, the water to the sky and the stars and everything that allows us to be human being. And so we really believe all these things are interconnected, and it's really important that we recognize those things. And I think we've really fallen out of balance in today's world. So it's important that we start out in that mentality as we talk about our people and our history. You know, a lot of people talk about all the genocides that have happened over the course of history. And, you know, here in America, they say over 20 million people were murdered here on this very land. And yet we don't talk about that You know, my grandmother was sent to a boarding school where they beat her and took away our language, and we don't talk about that in the schools. You know, my father was part of the Indian relocation program. They sent him here to Minneapolis. They sent many of our people to these urban centers with no resources, and you see the highest percentage of homeless people being Native Americans. Those the hardest hit are the ones, the original inhabitants of this land, and we're forgotten. We're walked by on the streets, we're forgotten. And so today is about starting to turn the tide of that memory of who our people are and what we represent. Not only the historical memories, but the modern day living examples of who we are and what we're all about. And yes, we have trauma. Yes, our people have suffered, and we still continue to suffer. You know, in Red Lake, we have over 10% of our population is still homeless. You know, over 40% of our children live in poverty. They don't have a house over their head. They don't have clothing and food to live. And yet we ignore the Native people. We ignore the history that created these inequities. And so today is a start. By no means is it going to solve the problems that I talk about, but at least the acknowledgement of these historical facts, the acknowledgement of the harm that was caused is a good first step. And it's a step that many people neglect. They neglect to look at the truth behind what happened. They neglect to look at the truth of our people and the resilience that we have. They neglect to look at all the modern day examples of resiliency, the pride that we have in our language, our culture, and our history, the things that we had to fight for. It wasn't until the 70s that we were able to practice our traditions. We had to continue our way of life in secret. We had to hide who we were, or we were going to be punished. And so let's start out by at least starting to educate people. Let's start out with some truth. You know, and the truth, it's hard. It's hard to digest what happened to our people. It's hard to digest that some of your ancestors may have participated in these horrible tragedies that occurred right here on this land. But if you really mean to make those wrongs right, we need to start with telling people the truth. We need to start by giving some time to these truths so we can begin to address these inequalities and these inequities that have happened from the direct result of state and federal government actions to eliminate our people. And so today, I try to come here in a good way, and I speak with passion because when I do these things, I don't just speak for me. I speak for my ancestors, my grandmother, my father. I speak for those children that are suffering today. I also speak for the strength that we have. I also speak for the powwows and the culture and the language speakers. I speak for the immersion schools that we have where we're regaining our identity and our way of life. And so it's important that the community knows these truths, and there's a reason for it. If we acknowledge the truths of the past, we will not replicate those in the future. But if we try to hide these facts, it will continue to happen. And if these facts are hidden, these inequalities will continue. And now we have become a part of that oppression, as opposed to becoming a part of that solution. And so I urge you to think about our ancestors that have suffered. I urge you to think about those that are still suffering. But I also urge for you to learn more about the strengths of our people. I urge you to learn more about our language and our culture, as they hold a lot of value in today's world. They hold value when it comes to global warming, when it comes to all the environmental catastrophes that we see going on, the drought, the lack of food in our world. These are a direct result of these inabilities to capture who we are and how we're connected to everything that we live within. And so I thank you for the time today. I'm more than happy to help educate or talk more on these issues. And miigwech for inviting me, and miigwech for listening to this very important topic.
Thank you, Mr. Strong. And I pause again to see if we do have any member questions at this point in our testimony. Yes. Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Keeler, thank you for bringing this bill forward. Yes, it is important to educate. It is important to recognize our Native people. I've spent much of my life as an educator and as a legislator striving to bring forth the truth about our history. And so the truth is important. I will be supporting the establishment of Indigenous Peoples Day. We have other days, 3 others, that I wish we had some similar recognition to. I'm not doing any amendments or anything like that this year, but just bringing that up, that we do have Veterans Day, we have Washington, we have Lincoln, we have Martin Luther King, obviously, and it would be good if our schools, if they were in session, would have an hour recognizing each of those as well. I think it's important to look at the historical perspective regarding Columbus Day. It's not about really the man. I mean, there were some serious, shall we say, deficiencies, I believe, in the history of Abraham Lincoln, in the history of Christopher Columbus. And, but it was the Italian people who were being persecuted in a lot of our earlier history. And to some extent, Catholics. And in the early part of the 20th century, Catholics and Italians basically banded together looking for some symbol that could elevate them in the eyes of the people of the United States. I would suggest that they could have chosen better than they did. But they chose Christopher Columbus as their symbol. They could have been, again, a better choice, a more historically accurate choice, but that's what we have to this day. And so I'm not opposed to having an Indigenous People Day. Again, I think the truth is important. The history of Native people is important. I would also wish that some of these other days that we have would receive similar emphasis in our schools.
Thank you, Representative Erdahl. And Representative Keeler.
Thank you, Chair.
Comment.
Representative Erdahl, in statute, it actually already does say on Martin Luther King's birthday, Washington's birthday, Lincoln's birthday, and veterans, at least 1 hour of school programming must be devoted to patriotic observance of the day. It's actually the language I took when I changed it. I just, instead of patriotic observation, we added examples of cultural ideas that schools could highlight. So that was just taking an example of what we're already doing in school standards and just making it more indigenized, I guess. So thank you.
Representative Erdahl, follow-up?
Yes, thank you. And Representative Keeler, you are correct. However, from my experiences with schools and being in them as a teacher myself, it's very inconsistent as to if schools actually do place the emphasis on those. I remember when I taught, I did things for Martin Luther King in my classroom, but that was it. So all I was looking for is that it would be nice if there were some more consistency throughout the state regarding this. For example, you are providing direction regarding what should be done, but there is no direction for schools to follow regarding the other 3 days.
Thank you, Representative Erdahl. All right, and we will finish with our last testifier for this section of the bill presentation, Dolores Gabbard, Moorhead Indian educator, who is on remote right now. Are you able to hear us okay?
I'm able to hear you. Can you hear me okay?
All right, thank you so much for being with us today. And maybe people can't hear me very well either, but if you can make sure that your voice is coming on strong, I think that will help the people, everyone in the room hear you.
Halmatakiapi, Ampete de Chante, Iushki Anape, Chiuzipi, Dolores Gabbard, Amakiapi, Dakota Chaze, Skake Wakawi. I'd like to thank you for having me today. My name is Dolores Gabbard, and I work for Moorhead Indian Education Program in Moorhead, Minnesota, as a Indian Education Liaison. I've been in my position for approximately 7 years, and I plan to be here till the end. I love what I'm doing, and I love the children that I work with. And I love the growth that we've seen as a school district and as a program. And, I come here today to share a little bit about that. Um, you know, Heather Keeler and myself were kind of the catalyst for our school district to take a look at Columbus Day and, to rewrite the narrative. Um, and that's continued. And I see, great growth as a district to the point where decisions are being made and our program is being consulted first when it has to do with Indigenous Peoples Day. So coming to us for guidance has been amazing. And really what I feel like this bill would do is to change the narrative statewide for our students. I understand that there are some that still believe that it is important to learn about Columbus, but I think that it's also important to learn about the history of the Native Americans in this country and specifically in this state. And so, having that Indigenous Peoples Day have that mandatory time would be an amazing step in the right direction. Um, I also wanted to talk about, the historical trauma piece that the other testifiers talked about and the injustices. And I think that just comes back to rewriting the narrative and honoring the history of the Native Americans in this state and the experiences that we have had. And we talk about, as educators, about closing achievement gaps. And so as a state, I would hope that we would realize that, things like these or things like this bill would be able to help with that. And just talking about the other days that we celebrate, with Abraham Lincoln and Columbus Day. And, if you know history well enough and the injustices that those people were a part of against Native Americans, I think that you might see it from a different perspective. Sorry, I'm a little bit emotional about it today. I apologize. Um, I think that's probably all that I have to say. If anybody has any, oh, sorry, there's one more thing that I wanted to say. If you think about Minnesota and our current demographics, and I don't know about other areas in the state, but I do know that in our school district, our Native American numbers are growing exponentially, and I don't think that's going to change. And so I think that when we consider our audiences in schools, that it does make sense to rethink what we're teaching our kids. And that's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Even on remotely, you can sense somebody's emotion and caring for this issue. So we appreciate that you continued and completed your points. Okay, so we do have one more. It's 4 minutes. Okay, sorry. We're clarifying another testifier that's for later on, actually, not for your bill, Representative Keeler. So we do have public testimony from our Department of Education, Mr. Adosh Uni. If he is able to come forward at this time and present. Mr. Uni, please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Adosh Uni. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Minnesota Department of Education. And Madam Chair, again, Representative Keeler, committee members, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify in support of this bill. MDE is more than happy to voice our support for this initiative. On October 14th, 2019, Governor Walz proclaimed the day Indigenous Peoples Day in Minnesota and has done so in all subsequent years. Our state is honored to have the highest serving Native American woman in state office with our Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, a member of the White Earth Nation. Recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day has been a stance that the governor, lieutenant governor, and the new commissioner are proud to uphold. It is far past due that we as a state elevate, validate, and honor the voices of Native people who were the first residents of the land upon which we now sit. Our schools are not only a place of learning academics and materials, but also understanding how that subject applies to the world around them, the people around them, and their surroundings. Our tribal nations are distinct government bodies, not just our neighbors and community members, whose role in and contributions to our country is deserving of a day of recognition. Native Americans have a long history on these lands, have strong cultural beliefs, and they are an integral part of our country's history, present, and future. MDE believes that a body of people with so much to contribute to our students' learning experience is important to hold space for. MDE's Office of American Indian Education and the Indigenous Education Specialists continue to stand ready to provide schools with the information and resources to be able to speak about Native history and culture accurately and holistically. Again, the Commissioner and MDE are happy to support HF 211 and thank Representative Keeler for her work to elevate the importance of Indigenous Peoples Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Uni. Representative Keeler. All right, well, any other member discussion at this point? Excuse me. Representative Burke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sitting in this room at nearly 50 years old. And I want to talk about the fact that, last year, I learned about the brutality and the legacy of boarding schools. How is that okay on any level that I went through my entire educational career, ended up in this house, and I didn't know about boarding schools? The people that came here today to explain their very existence to us, who were vulnerable, to teach us about a history in these short few moments that we should have already known. Representative Keeler carrying this bill 2 sessions in a row. Like, I learned all about Washington, Lincoln, Christopher Columbus. Didn't know about boarding schools. Let's remember that, members, when we take this vote. Thank you, Representative Keeler, for carrying this, for showing us what we should have always known, and for doing this for the future generations that will sit in classrooms and hopefully understand not only the land that they are living on, but the history of your beautiful people.
Thank you, Representative Berg. Other member discussions? All right. Representative Keeler, your final words.
Thank you for providing the opportunity to have this conversation. This is a conversation I've been advocating for years. When I mentioned this when we did our intros, when I did my practicum work, the #1 response that our kids had to their barriers to academic success was that they didn't feel seen. And I know, as an individual who holds 4 degrees, I've never seen a teacher at the front of a classroom who looks like me. Therefore, they're also not talking about us in curriculum and in a world that we're very much visible. I think we need to stop the invisibility of us in education settings. So I appreciate a yes vote on this to move it forward. Thank you.
All right, with that, Representative Keeler does renew her motion to move House File 2111 to the State Local Government Finance and Policy Committee. All in favor of that motion, please vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Representative Keeler. Next up, we have House File 133. Representative Becker-Finn is our author. Welcome to the committee. Nice to see you. Representative Becker-Finn is not a member of our committee, but I will have Representative Frazier make a motion to move House File 133 before the committee, and then also we recommending that we re-refer this bill to the Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Committee, where I think it'll be well taken care of. All right, Representative Frazier, your motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will motion to move House File 133 before the committee with a recommendation to refer the bill to Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Committee.
All right, the bill is now before us. Chair Becker-Finn, please identify yourself for the records and proceed with your testimony.
Representative Jamie Becker-Finn, and members who've served on this committee before. This is probably not the first time you have heard about this bill. I've been carrying this bill for many years. It's a pretty straightforward bill, despite it involving Chapter 13 on data practices, which is why it'll be coming to my committee next. Essentially, all it does is allow a tribal nation to have data about students who are either members of their nation or descendant students. So for example, and I think, having Representative Keeler's bill go before me, that testimony also speaks to how important this bill is. So for example, with the testimony of Secretary Strong about how government policies separated our people so that we have, folks from my home nation, from Leech Lake Nation, are all over this state and the country. And for example, my kids are Leech Lake descendants. They attend Roseville Public Schools. There aren't a lot of Leech Lake Nation descendant students in our schools. What this would do would mean that the folks at Leech Lake could receive information about my kids so that they could better support my kids. So even though my son has been the lone Native kid in nearly every classroom he has been in, wouldn't it be great if my home nation, if Leech Lake could support his learning and support him as a student by having that information, by being able to make contact, by able to connect those dots and reconnect our communities, even though we may be physically separated at this time. So it's pretty limited. It's not going to apply to most of your kids in this room, but it's going to apply to my kids and Representative Keeler's kids and better connect our kids, our students, with their home communities and their home cultures. And I think it's also important as we discuss the things that were brought up in the previous testimony of the boarding school era and all of those things that sort of disconnected our children from their culture. This is a way to better connect our students to their culture. And so that's what this bill does. It just adds one more. And as you'll see too if you look at the bill, the first couple pages are kind of showing you all the other exceptions of ways we share educational data to volunteers who have a legitimate educational interest, to recruiters, to justice systems, to the Commissioner of Ed for other things. We're just asking that tribal governments be added to this list of exceptions, at least when it comes to students who are either members of their tribe or descendants of their tribe. So that's the bill. There is a testifier here from Leech Lake, and I would like to make sure that she has time to testify.
So I have Director of Education, Lori Harper. Please proceed to the table and identify yourself for the record.
Anin. I am Lori Harper. I'm the Director of Education for Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. I am also a Tribal Nations Education Committee rep, which is the, I'm sure you know, the body named in statute to consult with on anything having to do with education in tribal nations. So, miigwech, again. What I would like to say to support Representative Finn, sorry, is that we have 11 sovereign nations in the state of Minnesota, and we're all at different stages of development as far as our tribal education agencies are concerned. Some of us are a little bit further than others. And by including tribal nations in this bill would allow us access in a more timely fashion that will help us provide services not just to our students, our American Indian students, but also to their families. Tribal nations are governmental agencies as well, and we have a responsibility, just as the state of Minnesota has a responsibility to all the citizens in the state of Minnesota, we have responsibilities to our tribal citizens as well. By providing better support services all the way around for our students and our families, not only benefits our students, but it benefits other students in the state. I'm a little bit of a data nerd. I know, looking at numbers and at charts and at graphs, that when American Indian students do better across the board in your achievements that you've stated or MDE has stated are the achievement goals, it raises the scores for all of our students across the board. And who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want as much assistance to our lowest performing students in the state as reasonably possible? Miigwech.
Thank you, Ms. Harper. Appreciate you speaking to us. And I also have public testimony on the bill. And if it's fine with the bill author, we will proceed with that. Mr. Adoshuni from the Department of Education, Director Uni.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. Again, my name is Adoshuni. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Minnesota Department of Education. As Chair Becker-Finn had mentioned, we've heard this bill several times over the years and in various committees, few legislative sessions, and I do really want to genuinely thank Chair Becker-Finn for persistently championing this effort. This is one of the first items out of the American Indian education package that the governor, lieutenant governor put forward, and Chair Becker-Finn has really championed this every session, so I want to thank her for that. Broadly, this bill, and I'll just kind of explain a little bit more detail, a few angles that Chair Becker-Finn hadn't covered, and then and that'll comprise most of my testimony. So broadly, this bill would allow districts and charters to share private educational data with tribal nations about their tribally enrolled or descendant students, specifically to support the educational attainment of those students. It adds tribal nations as a specific entity to a list that Chair Becker-Finn had mentioned a few of the items on, but of 17 already permissible uses and entities allowed to receive this private educational data for legitimate educational purposes. And in this case, it would be specifically about the educational attainment, experience, and access to educational opportunities for these students. Currently, we have 37 districts or charters that are required to engage in tribal consultation under the federal Every Student Succeeds Act. And many of our districts and charters have done a great job in partnering with our tribal nations or tribal representative entities like the Tribal Nations Education Committee to share data to be able to look at what is best, what is the best educational programming for their tribally enrolled or descendant students. However, there are some districts or charters based on legal advice that are determining that since tribal nations are not explicitly listed in the list under Chapter 13, and they basically decide that they don't qualify as maybe a volunteer organization under Paragraph J, that the district is not allowed to share the educational data with the tribal nation for this legitimate educational purpose without some type of prior consent. The department believes firmly that tribal nations would qualify as a volunteer organization under this list, but To address that concern, we've come forward with this proposal that would facilitate the permission in statute explicitly for districts and charters to have that legal cover to share that data with tribal nations to meaningfully engage in tribal consultation. Again, this would be for the purposes of enhancing educational programming, looking at the impact on how tribal nation student or descendant student is doing, and be able to provide advice to the district or charters based on that data. Additionally, this would allow tribal nations more opportunities to access local data that MDE may not receive on a regular basis or short-term basis in order to provide quick support services to their tribally enrolled or descendant students. For example, a district could share attendance data with a tribal nation to allow them to support a student and their family with whatever they may need to return to regular attendance. And this is data that MDE would not have in real time to have that real impact for that family and that student. And this proposal would facilitate a deeper partnership between districts and tribal nations to support their students and families and really support tribal consultation responsibilities under federal law. Again, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to provide support to this important initiative and to Chair Becker-Finn for consistently championing this effort.
Thank you, Director Uni, for your testimony and the support of this bill. At this point, I have no more testifiers. Member discussion and questions. Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Becker-Finn. Is there an opt-out provision for parents if they don't want to participate?
Sorry. Chair Becker-Finn, please.
Thank you. I'm well-trained. Was waiting to be recognized. I don't have Mr. Hopkins, who is my go-to on all data, but I believe 13.32 and other places in the educational data statute there is, I mean, there's always an opt-out if parents want to. It's the same with other kinds of educational data. If you don't want to participate, you're not forced to.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine this is also a question that can be verified in the next stop for the bill. Follow-up, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Becker-Finn. That's good to know. It might be important to emphasize that in some way in this so that they would know without digging through some other statutes. Thank you.
Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I apologize, I was not prepared to answer that question. And this committee is the Education Policy Committee, but I will give you the advice I give my legislative process students, which is whenever there's a statute mentioned, it would be great if they print out the whole area of statute that applies, but they don't. It saves us paper, but often your answers can be found in those definitions if you look those up.
Thank you, Representative Becker-Finn. Other questions or discussions? All right, closing words, Representative.
Just thank you for your attention to this bill and bringing it forward early in session. We're hopeful this is finally the year that we can get this done for our tribal students. And also want to thank my testifier. It's always nice to have somebody from my home community. I changed my name 18 years ago, but I'm still Jamie Finn back on the res. So just really appreciate the testimony and appreciate Secretary Strong and our other testifiers being here today as well. So thank you. Appreciate the support.
And with that, Representative Fraser renews his motion to refer House File 133 to the Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Committee. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, bill is on its way. Oh, well, isn't this slick? Now, we have another bill from Representative Becker-Finn. We will now hear House File 170. And again, Representative Becker-Finn not being, oh, I got caught too. Becker-Finn not be a member of this committee. I'll have Representative Lee, would you please make the motion to refer House File 170, bring it before the committee, and refer it to the Education Finance Committee? Representative Lee.
Yes, Chair. I move House File 170 before the committee with a recommendation to re-refer to the bill to Education Finance.
Right. Thank you, Representative Lee. All right, so the bill is before us right now, and Representative Becker-Finn, for this bill, please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Very efficient. We've got two of my bills up today. So this is a different category of way we could make things better for our students. And this was a bill that was brought to me several years ago from some constituents who actually with redistricting are no longer my constituents, but I promised them I would get this done, and so I'm going to keep working on it. Specifically, there is a student, and you're going to hear from him in just a couple minutes, who he needed access to a certified deaf interpreter. So many folks might not be aware there's a difference between an American Sign Language interpreter and a CDI, a certified deaf interpreter. And so for some students, they're going to need that CDI interpreter. And other school districts may have interpreted the statute such that they did feel like they could reimburse for a CDI, but the school district that Dove, who you're going to hear from, that he attends, they kind of determined it isn't clear in statute whether we can get reimbursement for a CDI, and so they have kind of had to piece things together, and he really hasn't had access to the interpreting services that he needs to be successful as a student. So this is a bill that does not impact very many students in our state, but for the students who it does impact, it's the difference between thriving or not as a young person in school. And this is also in support of students like Dove who want to attend school in their home community. I know some of the feedback we've gotten over the years, again, this is a bill that I've brought forth again and again. Some of the feedback was, why can't he just go to the Metro Deaf School? Or why can't he just go somewhere? Well, that's not the message that we should be giving any of our students. We should be giving them the tools so that they can thrive wherever they are. And so, it seems like a straightforward thing. We're just trying to add certified deaf interpreter to the list of interpreters that can be reimbursed and are legal under statute. But it has been a slog to get this through. I believe Dove was in middle school initially when we brought this forward. So it's in ways been heartbreaking to see this kid who just needs the right services that I think he has a right to. Not receive those services. And so I am very hopeful. We have been told over the years that there is a small cost to this because it's a little bit more involved with a certified deaf interpreter as opposed to an ASL interpreter. It's somewhere in that, I believe the fiscal note last year was $200,000, but it is a cost, and so that's why we're going to education finance after this. But with that, Madam Chair, I want to make sure we have time for our testifiers because we have several folks who are really passionate about this bill and wanting to get it moved forward.
All right. Thank you, Representative Becker-Finn. So the first on the list is I do have Dove and Galvin Nathanson, and I believe that they are here in person. Please proceed to the table. And these are the brothers, is that what you said? Wonderful.
And yes, we are brothers.
Yes. And the first thing is if you can identify yourself for the record and for our committee.
Yes, hello. My name is Dove Nathanson, and I use he, him pronouns. And hello, my name is Galvin Nathanson, and I use he, him pronouns as well. Should we begin?
Could you speak up a little bit?
I'll go ahead and begin.
And-
Hello.
And actually,
Chair,
we
oh.
might be having a problem right now. Sorry, that you're not on a microphone, or? are
Can
we-
you hear me?
Yes, now we
Okay.
can.
I'll just put it closer to my mouth.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right. My name is Dove, and thank you, Chairperson and committee, for hearing me today. I am currently in the 11th grade, and I am deaf, and ASL is my native language. I have gone through 10 years of being denied equitable access to my education because school districts said that there was no legal recognition of deaf interpreters within K-12 systems and the services they provide. even though RID, the National Organization of Interpreters, confirm that deaf interpreters are trained linguistic and cultural experts that work with deaf and hard of hearing people to ensure equitable access across various settings, including K-12, the district has disregarded that because of a technicality in our law. Being denied the support that could be provided caused me to unnecessarily struggle academically and contributed to significant delays in my educational progress. The solution to the problem is simple enough: fix the statute to recognize these qualified professionals. We have done our due process of working with everyone we possibly could to resolve this in my district, the Minnesota Commission for the Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing and Minnesota Department of Education. We are here together to ask your help to not delay this fundamental civil right for us any longer to obtain an effective access to education. It has been far too long. It may be becoming too late for me, but I still have my brother here and other kids who I want to see this get better for. And hello, I am in the 9th grade. This is Galvin. And I need language support as well. I am a freshman and I have a learning disability. So this need for this kind of language support that could be provided by having a deaf interpreter during my education is even more essential for me. Deaf interpreters are often more experienced working with people like me, and they know how to fit me and my language better. This would make a huge difference for me to have that expertise supporting me to succeed. It has been frustrating to watch my own brother go through this problem growing up, and then to know that the same comes for me. This is not okay, and you have the power to fix it. I request that you pass this bill so that this excuse to not give us this right can no longer be used to deny access for kids like me anymore. We need full language access for our education and our future. Please, thank you.
Thank you. We're grateful that you're here today and that you presented your experience and was very clear about what we should be doing. Thank you. All right. We do have more testifiers. And the next would be Alicia Lane Outlaw, Government Relations Director, Minnesota Commission of the Deaf. And if you would, again, identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Chair Pryor and committee members, my name is Alicia Lane, and I'm testifying as the Government Relations Director for the Minnesota Commission of the Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing. I am here to express the Commission's support for House File 170. The goal is simple: include certified deaf interpreters, or CDIs, in existing educational interpreter statutes. The way the current statutes are written, they exclude CDIs from being considered educational interpreters in the state of Minnesota. CDIs have knowledge and experience on par with hearing interpreters, and there's no reason they shouldn't be viewed as educational interpreters by the state of Minnesota. In recent months, literacy has been a hot topic in our state. And to be able to read, a child must first have access to usable language. Not just any old language, but usable language. For a deaf, deafblind, or hard of hearing child, even with hearing technology, vocalized language is often not fully usable. And this is where access to strong sign language models, especially through direct instruction, becomes critical for literacy. and really for overall cognitive development. I was born to hearing parents, and I have had no measurable hearing since becoming deaf as a baby. Most of my school career, I was the sole deaf child among my classmates. Direct instruction was not available to me. My hearing interpreters did their best, but trying to learn through an interpreter for hours on end was exhausting, frustrating, and inefficient. I was able to partially compensate for that lost time because I had parents at home who signed. Plus, I had a natural affinity for reading. Not all children have those advantages. Watching a hearing interpreter for hours on end is a massive cognitive burden to put on a child. A CDI draws from their native fluency in ASL and removes some of that cognitive burden so that the child can focus more deeply on learning the actual content. In other words, the quality of the child's learning becomes closer to that of direct instruction. And speaking of quality, we are acutely aware of severe staffing shortages in special education, including hearing educational interpreters. As a result, MDEE has extended the waivers they issue for hearing educational interpreters who fall short of score requirements on performance assessments. Not only is our pool of interpreters smaller, it's also of lower quality. Our deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing children are attempting to learn through interpreters who may not be up to par. Opening up this interpreter pool to CDIs means they can be put to work to mitigate the impact of quality issues and potentially accelerate the professional development of the hearing educational interpreters. Please support House File 170 to allow CDIs to support literacy and equitable learning access for all children in Minnesota. The Minnesota Commission of the Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing thanks Representatives Becker-Finn and Curran for supporting this bill, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. I think we'll turn to our next testifiers. Trevor Turner, Policy Director, Minnesota Council of Disabilities. And please identify yourself and proceed.
Hello, everyone. My name is Trevor Turner, and I'm the Public Policy Director for the Minnesota Council on Disability, and I'm also a deafblind adult. Thank you, Chair Pryor and members of the committee. The Minnesota Council on Disability supports House File 170 and urges the members of the committee to do the same. All students have a right to a world-class education in a language they understand at best, and this includes American Sign Language through a certified deaf interpreter. Students also have a right to an education in the communities and schools of their choice as guaranteed by the Supreme Court Olmstead decision. As Representative Becker-Finn mentioned earlier, we can't just send people to deaf schools just because it's easier. We don't want to segregate them. If they want to be in the communities of their choice, we should support that. And House File 170 removes the barrier to this right and promotes inclusive education by allowing certified deaf interpreters to serve our deaf and hard of hearing students in Minnesota schools. Far too often, students with disabilities are overlooked when education policies are implemented, and a simple oversight in our school ASL policies has denied deaf and hard of hearing students the right to an education through a certified deaf interpreter. Much like employees are guaranteed workplace accommodations by the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Minnesota Human Rights Act, students with disabilities are guaranteed the right to accommodations in the classroom that will help them excel in their academic careers. These accommodations are critical to an inclusive education and help lay a foundation for a lifelong success for students with disabilities. Certified deaf interpreters allow deaf and hard of hearing students to learn in the language of their choice and helps them excel academically. It also creates an inclusive educational space for all students by creating a bridge between deaf and non-deaf students, which benefits everyone in the classroom. Deaf and hard of hearing students provide a unique educational perspective that non-deaf students can learn a lot from themselves. Certified deaf interpreters allow deaf and hard of hearing students to share their unique perspective with their non-deaf peers, and all students who are exposed to different languages and alternative methods of learning benefit not just academically, but in life experience as well. The Minnesota Council on Disability supports any effort to create a more inclusive, integrative K-12 educational experience, to which House File 170 contributes. Historically, students with disabilities have been segregated into special classrooms away from their peers, which further segregates the disability community in other aspects of life. This segregation denies students with disabilities the opportunities to interact with non-disabled students and denies them the opportunity for an equal educational experience. House File 170 gives deaf and hard of hearing students an additional tool to allow them to stay in the classrooms of their choice. We at the Minnesota Council on Disability urge members of this committee to support House File 170 and support our deaf and hard of hearing students. I want to thank Representative Becker-Finn for carrying this bill, and thank you, members of the committee, for hearing.
Thank you. And our last testifier is Nick Sapko, who's from Sensor Communications. And please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Yes, hello. My name is Nick Zapko, and I'm a certified deaf interpreter. Hello, Chair Pryor and committee members. I really feel honored to be here, and thank you for giving me the time to share my thoughts about House File 170. As you know, since 2020, Governor Walz has been giving updates from Minnesota Department of Health as well, and you've seen me interpreting there since the pandemic and the riots and everything that was happening. This was really rattling for everyone within the community. And having access was really key for deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing members of our community, because they were able to simultaneously receive the same information as others in the state of Minnesota, and they felt that they were part of Minnesota then, as opposed to having the information later. And so as people were concerned and worried about what to do, what was going to be happening, as issues with COVID were coming out, it was a beautiful representation to have access, and it was inspiring for everyone. So that was the access during the pandemic and the riots. But now if we're looking at education in K-12 settings, where CDIs are not currently utilized, if we look at what the goal for education in schools are, it's for people's future. It's about learning, and it's not only learning content, but also social learning, developing relationships with administrators, within sports, within classroom and social engagements. And so this is talking about the goodness and the well-being of the entire child. And so if you look at deaf children, deafblind, and hard of hearing students who are in mainstream settings, they're not able to get the full access. They maybe have 1/2 or 1/4, and there's a lot of disconnect that can happen. And so looking at their future and what they could potentially become, it's really become a matter of just being in school to pass and graduate and get out of school. And that's because of a lack of access. If you could have a certified deaf interpreter in the classroom, that would be key, because for myself, I can say that I would understand better from a certified deaf interpreter, and knowing that there's also language and cultural and contextual information that would make it possible for me to develop relationships with my teachers and other students. Also, that would allow students to share what their passions and dreams are for the future and then grow towards them. You know, in elementary school, if you think about it, that students would say, oh, I want to be a teacher just like my teacher when I grow up. And so then when they study, and then they're going to go, and then they go back to a school, and then they're, as a teacher, then they're able to connect and relate with the students then. And seeing what the challenges are, and then those teachers can help bring up students in their learning. Now, as a CDI, I also was a student previously, and I went through the educational system, and I was constantly trying to reach out and learn what I could. And I was struggling with doing that. And now as I see myself as a CDI, and I'm able to provide language, contextual information, access to teachers, developing connections with principals, et cetera, anything along those lines, then I really felt like then the students could feel that they could be part of the school as well, in more of a spirit of celebration. So as I've seen the success for Governor Walz's speeches being interpreted and having that same kind of access, I can't see that in the schools districts because that's not allowable for me to go into the school districts now. And so I really believe in the state of Minnesota, and I believe that we want to prioritize children because they are our future. So thank you.
Thank you. We truly appreciated your testimony. All right, at this point, I think we're opening it up for member discussions and questions. Representative Keeler.
Thank you. I'm trying to, I learned that. They didn't see it. Okay. The one thing that I want to say is one of the most beautiful things about Minnesota is when our kids advocate for themselves, not only for themselves, but a younger brother. And I'm sorry that it's taken us so long to get to this point. This is absolutely inclusion. As somebody who talks a whole lot about representation and why that matters, and having people who have lived experiences like us only increase our likelihood of success in an academic setting. So I appreciate your advocacy for yourself and your family. I watching Nick throughout the pandemic was actually entertainment for me, right? Because we were watching the TV so often. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you, Jamie Becker-Finn, Representative Chair Becker-Finn, for highlighting this. I think often there's this idea that if a student doesn't fit into mainstream education, we'll just move them over to another space rather than making our education systems fit for all children. So thank you. This is absolutely something that we should be moving forward with. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Keeler. Okay. Other member comments or questions? Yes, Representative Rudolph. It never
Thank
gets
you,
old.
Madam
Whenever
Chair.
you want to be identified, just go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just have a question given me by someone from the audience. Do we, are the committee meetings closed captioned? And if not, can they be? I don't know who to ask that of.
Representative Weiss, do you know the answer?
Yes, I authored a bill last term that, I'm sorry. Yes, I authored a bill last term that expanded funding for closed captioning of committee hearings, so I believe they are. And Mr. Turner can probably confirm.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I think we'll take that that yes, they are. We'll have to watch these and find out. Any other member discussion or questions? All right, thank you, members. Representative Becker-Finn, closing remarks.
Yeah, I just, I can't say enough about Dove and Galvin being here to testify. A lot of kids would have probably given up on this at this point. That's how long. I'm not a person to cry in committee, but it is really emotional to me, like how long it has taken us. And we still haven't gotten this done yet for these kids. This is not a lot to ask. This has been, we've had bipartisan support in the past. just really hope that we can expedite this and finally take care of this oversight so that kids like Dove and Galvin and all the kids who need these services can thrive in their classroom and have an equal opportunity, the same as anyone else. Just really appreciate your time and attention today, and really want to thank all of our testifiers. The first time I testified, it was just me and the Nathanson family, so it's also been really incredible over the years to sort of galvanize all these folks together to push this forward. So thank you for being able to take all their testimony today, and just ask for member support for this bill.
Thank you, Representative Becker-Finn. And with that, Representative Lee renews her motion to refer House File 170 to the Education Finance Committee. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? With that, the motion carries, and the bill will be heard. Our Education Finance Committee will have the good fortune to also hear the bill. Thank you, Representative Becker-Finn. All right. So we are going to be wrapping up early. Otherwise, we could sit and talk for a while, but I think we'll just adjourn. Tomorrow, we will be hearing two bills. One on the prohibition of dismissal of students in kindergartens from kindergarten to grades 3, and also what we refer to as the Teachers of Colors Act. So with that, members, we are adjourned.